So, welcome everybody. This is a Beam Exchange Grab the Mic webinar. The Beam Exchange is a platform for sharing information, knowledge, ideas, and inspiration about market systems development. My name is Mike Albu, and along with my colleagues Isabel and Mike, I look after the Beam Exchange. We hold these webinars every few weeks for people in the field to talk about what they're doing. And today we're going to be talking about where do MSD leaders come from and how do we build the next generation. And this is a very exciting and interesting topic, one that has actually come out of some work that the DCED, the Donor Committee on Enterprise Development, was doing over the last 12 months, led by my colleague Mike Klassen, who's going to be explaining more. Through a process of consultation with a very large number of practitioners, team leaders, chiefs of party, experienced development people in the MSD space. And so it's a really rich body of work that he's going to be, and his colleagues are going to be talking about. And he has three speakers who he'll introduce, who were important contributors to this piece of work. And we're very privileged to have such an illustrious panel today. Anyway, I'm talking too much. But just a quick thing, if you'd like to chat with other people in the room, and there's over 45 of us now, please use the chat box, introduce yourselves. But if you have questions for the speakers, and they're going to speak for about half an hour, and then we'll turn to Q&A. If you have questions for the speakers, please put them in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. Thank you. I think that's enough from me. I'll hand over to my colleague, Mike Klassen. Mike.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much, Mike, and welcome everybody. So we're here to talk about where do MSD leaders come from, and who better to tell us than some of our kind of strong colleagues, leaders in this space. I'll introduce them in a minute right before they start to speak. But let me set the stage briefly. So this webinar is kind of anchored in a paper that we published back in November by the same title. And I want to just give you, kind of 30-second rundown of, what's the essence or the scope of that paper. So, the wider context is a growing number and, particularly diversity of MSD programs, different sectors, different kind of contexts, different kind of countries. And with that growth, there's a couple of challenges that were identified. One is that historically, targeted leadership development efforts have not been the strong suit, I think, in development at large, and that kind of problem shows up in MSD as well. And there's kind of another challenge, which is just that there's fairly fragmented information on career trajectories. I think anyone who works in this space kind of has an anecdotal sense of their own path and maybe some colleagues and people they've come across with. But before we kind of ran this process, we didn't really have such a good picture. And so those are kind of some of the problems the brief is responding to. The focus, the kind of objective, if you will, is around, understanding so that we can grow the pipeline of MSD leaders, I think particularly local leaders. And, what the paper does, it documents and analyzes career trajectories and key transitions. And that's some of what we'll share with you today. The last point to say is, leadership, you could do a whole webinar on definitions of leadership, but in a really brief kind of sentence or two, I think you can think of leadership as the position of being the team leader, the chief of party, the project director, but it's also kind of a process of influence. And so you don't need to be in a position of leadership to be considered an MSD leader. And hopefully that gives enough to go on. There's the link to the paper. Definitely encourage you to read it because this is an extremely brief overview. The process, where did this come from? Mike alluded to this, but we ran this series of leadership clinics. A number of those participants are here today, so great to see those folks coming out to cheer on colleagues. We had over 40 people from over 20 organizations, and essentially for 6 months, we met once a month for 90 minutes, intensive discussions on different topics, and the same small kind of breakout groups met each other over and over. So there was a kind of deepening and connecting over time. And what we're now trying to do is to make sense of all of those many, many conversations and mural boards and jam boards and kind of all the notes. So the plan is for 3 briefs. We're presenting today on the first brief, which has been published. The second one, which is actively under construction, is around supports for team leaders. What do leaders need to thrive? And by the end of the year, the plan is to publish a third one, which zooms in on programs and how do teams kind of cultivate and build cultures of leadership development. So I'll give you a little bit of the findings, a couple of the kind of bigger picture, high level things that we saw around kind of career pathways and, kind of some of the supports and barriers. And then we'll dive into the pathways that we saw and really try and bring those to life with Dhita, John, and Fouzia. So kind of two recurring supporting conditions we saw, kind of listening to this large group of practitioners and leaders. Number one, managers are absolutely key. Managers are the ones identifying, selecting, and amplifying talent. And the second one I think was quite interesting as well, the kind of importance of informality, informal relationships, networks, and those kind of unscripted mentorship relations between managers and mentors and the kind of informality. Those are the most kind of common recurring supporting conditions that help people accelerate through their careers. Constraints, there's several here. We've mentioned already a kind of historically lack of intentional skill building and leadership. For a while, I think there was also a sense that kind of you had to be a team leader to get a team leader job. So that kind of closed shop mentality that only a select few could do this job. I think that's changing. But for a long time, I think that was a real constraint or barrier. Other things, short project cycles that mean as people start to really hit their groove, they're taking off, they're learning, the project ends, you kind of have to search for a new position, maybe in a new country, maybe in the same country, and that I think can really kind of affect development and learning. And then at a more organizational level, we heard a lot of people talking about just turnover at the donor level, turnover at the HQ level and supports, and the kind of constant pressure for chasing new business and proposals also kind of can be a constraint to leadership development and growth. Lastly, there's a few special situations that came up in story after story, and so they're worth mentioning. One is around crises, and that could be a person suddenly leaving a position. It could be a really bad review that leads to a kind of changing of the whole leadership team. But essentially, those kinds of unexpected openings often give people a chance to step into senior management roles that they might not have otherwise had a shot at. Second kind of special situation is kind of placements that get created for people to kind of go and take a short-term assignment, perhaps in another country by the same organization. And then lastly, from an individual perspective, often some of the biggest transitions came when people left one organization and joined another. So that's a kind of real broad strokes picture of some high-level findings. But the main thing we want to get into in this webinar are these 6 pathways that we've kind of patterns we've seen that we've tried to codify. So to do that, I'll have my colleagues help me. So we've got Fouzia Nasreen, who's had a long history of working with Swisscontact, also as a consultant with various projects. So welcome, Fouzia. We've got Dhita Radcliffe, who until just recently was a team lead of a big MSD startup project in Ethiopia and is still with Mercy Corps in a kind of advisor role. And then John Rachkara, who's recently become the chief of party of a well-known project, RRA, in Nigeria with Mercy Corps. So welcome to the 3 of you. Now let's kind of get into the meat of this. So there's these 6 career pathways, and I want to start by talking about the first one, which we've titled the growth chamber. And in a very few words here, what's the growth chamber? The pattern we saw was when people had an intense immersion in a longer-term MSD program, that meant they had time and space to grow their MSD knowledge and experience or expertise, also a chance to kind of test out leading. And so rising through the technical ranks into senior management positions, the key drivers of this pathway are kind of twofold. On the one hand, a kind of powerful internal program culture that explicitly wants to promote and grow leaders, kind of preparing them for more responsibility. And on the other hand, you need individuals who rise to that challenge, who say, yes, I'm going to stick with this program. I'm committed to learn about MSD, master the technical challenges, and then that kind of leading to growth within the program. And to kind of bring this to life a little bit, I'd love to turn it over to you, Fouzia. And you've had a long career in MSD, but you started in the early days working on the Catalyst program. Any reflections on kind of what it was like being part of that Catalyst program culture? What stayed with you kind of from that experience? And in today's environment, do you see other MSD programs creating that kind of growth chamber environment for up and coming MSD practitioners today?
Thank you, Mike. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think, Mike, that's a very, very good question. And for me, to be honest, I think three aspects of the Catalyst project really contributed to the growth of my early career as an MSD professional. I would say number one being, as you mentioned, the culture of learning that it provided, and really the on-the-job learning opportunities. The management was very keen on developing the skills of local national professionals, national staff. They invested in trainings, in sending junior staff to international national platforms for training or representing the project, so that not only build the technical skills of young ones like us, but also build our confidence. I think that was a very, very important contributor. The second one, I think the fact that the Catalyst project worked in a wide portfolio of sectors, ranging from rural to industrial sectors to service sectors, really encouraged us to learn more. There were a lot of cross exchanges between the sector teams. We sort of sometimes even competed. Okay, you have these many interventions. What are you doing? Why is that partner so happy with the project or the intervention? What went wrong with this? So there was a lot of this practical cross-learning between the teams because of that wide portfolio. So that really contributed to our learning. And the third and very important aspect, Mike, it was the early stages of the Catalyst program, as many of you might know, was really during the time when MSD was evolving, as you also mentioned, the early days. So the structure, the project structure was very flat, and it gave the opportunity of young professionals to engage more with different management team. But the structure really grew organically as the project moved on. Promotions were made based on performance and team management capabilities, which really sort of, assessed the capabilities of the young MSD potential professionals. And that really provided a room to groom up new managers. So for instance, in my case, I was really, when I was moved on to as a promoted to a deputy or senior manager in the project, I was literally coached and mentored by one of the team members in the management team to look at how I should manage things, how I should be dealing with donors, what should I be, really reporting at, how can we do it, all those nuances that really was not there in as a junior staff. So I think that progression of having an organic way of coming up with the structure in the project really groomed some of us to become more technically sound than we are right now. So these all sort of shaped who I am and where am I now. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks so much for those perspectives. I mean, this pathway showed up a lot, both in the interviews we did and some of the discussions as critically influential, particularly in that kind of early MSD career phase. The way it's been written in the paper is kind of assuming the growth chamber is a single program, but I think we're also starting to see examples of kind of, clusters of programs and perhaps countries that have kind of brought in a kind of cohort, a network of like-minded kind of MSD thinkers. And one that's been coming up a lot in the last couple of years is this kind of network of Ugandan MSD professionals that kind of worked on various programs maybe 10, 15 years ago, have kind of moved on and out into other projects. John, I want to maybe ask you for your reflections. I think you were very much kind of part of that, early wave of Ugandan MSD professionals. Did you experience it as a bit of a growth chamber? What were some of your learnings being part of that? Can it be replicated in other contexts?
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues who are participating at this event. Just to the question you have asked, Mike, for me, my journey starts like 15 years ago when I was first introduced to systems thinking. And immediately, even as I learned, and talked to other leaders, I could see myself really in this space. I began to see this as something that was very, very relevant for the future of the kind of work that I was doing. And immediately I advised myself to, basically put on what I would, it's an analogy I always use, putting on a microscope on one eye and a telescope on the other eye. Now, I wouldn't advise that people try that in practice. It will give you a lot of headache. But for me, that was critical because the microscope was helping me to kind of figure out what do I need to perform better in the MSD, in those early MSD projects. But also the telescope on the other hand was helping me to kind of like zoom into the future and say, okay, where is this industry moving? Who are the leaders? What are they thinking? And what skill sets really must I continuously learn in order to contribute to the leadership of market systems development into the future? And that's like what I use, like microscope in one eye and a telescope in the other eye. But like Fouzia, also three things stood out clearly for me, even back in the early days. As one of the people in the network of early practitioners of MSD in Uganda. One was that working in organizations that were really serious about building a learning culture, because as we all know, MSD can only thrive well where the culture of learning is taken really seriously. The second thing that also stood out for me was really going after working into projects that nurtured thought leadership, not only just executing, the business of the day, but also helping build other future leaders. And I think I've been quite lucky in being part of those projects that were really, really building leadership for the future. The third, which was also very instrumental for me as a person, was really just having a right set of mentors. I was recruited as a mentee by some people, but also I recruited mentors for myself, people who knew the industry, people who were really at the forefront of thinking forward on what market systems development would look like. And those categories of people really, really helped to nurture my growth. I think this is how I've been able to move from, field project officer position throughout to now being the chief of party or team leader of a large and a complex program in Nigeria. Let me pause there, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. I mean, bringing some really interesting different layers and that kind of role of proactively kind of seeing the opportunity and recruiting your own mentors. I like that phrase. Let me touch now on a couple of the other pathways. So we've talked about growth chamber. The next one, we're not going to go in depth to the panel just because it's not super well represented here, but the next one is called unexpected roots and shoots. And I think we're seeing this emerge more and more in the kind of recent years. So this is staff or consultants who rise into leadership roles, not because they've been kind of intervention managers and kind of head of portfolio, not through the kind of technical leadership route, but actually through operations or finance or particularly monitoring, evaluation, learning, or MRM. And so the drivers here is, people that are kind of deeply invested in understanding the kind of strategy, the objectives, why are we partnering in this way? So kind of grasping MSD, but importantly, its implications for their non-technical function, whether that's MEL or grants or operations, what have you. And then being so deeply kind of familiar with the program's culture and dynamics that when an opening is created, because of their familiarity, because people have seen them work, they kind of, again, they get that promotion, not because of their CV, but because they've proven they grasp MSD in practice by working with the teams. And I think we're seeing more and more of those MEL leaders and operations leaders rising even up to the level of CEO or team leader. So that's unexpected roots and shoots. Then the next one we will talk about a bit more here. Where have I gone? Sorry, let me just pull you back. Too many things open. The next one is strictly business, which is about people coming from the private sector and rapidly transitioning onto an MSD program and up into leadership positions. So people that are recruited for that kind of business or private sector insight, kind of bringing that sense of confidence and management skills. I think the drivers here where we've seen this pathway emerge a lot, implementers that are hiring more for their competency, not necessarily because people have past development experience. And then the kind of internal dynamics are driven by rapid learning, managers using those private sector insights to actually make the program's MSD strategies better and more effective over time, that kind of giving them the impetus to rise into leadership roles. So for this one, I want to call on Dhita to share, a few of your own reflections, especially that kind of early transition you made from working in a multinational to joining the Prisma program. How did your learning and your experience in the private sector kind of help you move into Prisma as an MSD program and then up quickly into leadership roles in the project?
Thanks so much, Mike. Yeah, as Mike mentioned, I used to work in Unilever in sales, brand management. So initially I thought, what can I do more for the community? So I took a career change. I got a scholarship, a government scholarship to do international development. And when I came home, Prisma was advertising positions. And in the JD, it did say about, like if you can develop businesses, supply chain that benefits people. So there's no mention of like NGO experience. So I didn't feel overwhelmed. And I felt like also that this aligns with my background. So I applied and then I got in. And I think there are also similarities that I found in working in Unilever, in an MNC, and in Prisma, where Prisma highly rewards innovative thinking. It has, flatter hierarchy. They provide safe space to come forward with your ideas. And also they have provided me and other women as well, and other, young practitioners from the business management side, an equal opportunity. So I got promoted to head of portfolio, which is the member of core management team within 3 years of my career there. And I think what contributed is, again, as Mike said, my experience in the private sector, where those years in Unilever, you gain a perspective on how to set up a business, on how to grow sales, but not only that, not only the consumer-facing strategy, but also how business grows and how they procure their investment, the production, supply chain, budgeting, marketing, projecting, analyzing target markets. Those are the things that really aligns with our MSD work. And it also really helps in analyzing your, your target impact also, and the trajectory to get there.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot, Dhita. And, we saw in the clinics a lot of other examples of people kind of having this, having that pathway, and it's, both the skills that you bring and also kind of how the organization kind of, makes it easy, whether that's job description, it's hiring, it's onboarding, and the kind of some of the support systems that you're talking about. So moving into there's 6 career pathways, and I think these first 3, to some extent, are kind of, loosely termed in the kind of like early or kind of front half of a career. And the other 3 pathways are best thought of as kind of what happens through kind of mid or later career parts of the trajectory. So it's not like any one person fits one pathway and that's it. I think I didn't say that at the beginning, but I should mention it. So the 4th one we've called movers and shakers. And so this, is really about leaders who learn MSD, learn to apply MSD in programs in their own country, take on leadership roles, and then ultimately kind of make that move into international roles, into consulting roles, kind of in other countries. So some of the drivers here, I think a central driver is around kind of what does mobility bring to you? So when you move between countries, it kind of broadens experience. Maybe it challenges some of your assumptions of how things work, building those new insights. And in some sense, even as people maybe move between countries and organizations, the MSD part of the career actually becomes kind of that continuity, that, I think that sense of identity, this is the work I do. The other kind of negative drivers are sometimes there's just an absence of opportunity to keep learning and growing in MSD in a local context, particularly if program is at the end of life. There's no clear follow-on project from the donor. If you want to keep doing that work, there just may not be a lot of it in that context. So yeah, for this one, we've got lots of experience in the panel, people that have lived in one place, moved and worked, but maybe I'll start with you, John, to get some reflections. So we talked earlier about kind of started in your MSD career in Uganda, but then you've obviously recently moved to Nigeria, a totally different context. Can you tell us a bit about what drove the decision to move, and also what you've learned about applying MSD and specifically in northern Nigeria, kind of how different is that to the Ugandan context that you got to know so well?
Yes, thank you, Mike. And for me, if I could just divide my journey like probably in phases. My first 7 to 8 years, I kind of like moved from one organization to the others, and I was growth hungry, really just learning new cultures, learning new leadership styles, and learning from various projects, and not necessarily pursuing the pathway of vertical, within the hierarchy, but rather just trying to learn what does really market systems development look like within the different organizations that we're working with. That movement also helped me to move from one project to the others, and I found myself working in thin markets, in large markets, in commodity markets, in labor and service markets, in rural and urban settings, in even stable and conflict-affected markets. So that kind of like gave me like a blend of what systems thinking looks like across a broad spectrum of things. So it kind of gave me this appetite to try out new things and stuff like that. But also within this period, I've been lucky enough to work with several reputable, international team leaders who really invested their time and resources in mentoring me. I could mention a few names. I worked very closely under Colin Sapoyo when I was in Palladium and also in DAI. He really offered a lot of support to me. Even to this day, while I'm serving as team leader, I still look up to other team leaders, and I reach out to Collins, and he's always having an open arm to discuss some of the challenges with me. David Wazemba is with Gatsby, rather is with Agra. He also made a lot of investments in me. But I also kept my eyes on other thought leaders, people who I probably worked with in the past, but yet, I knew that these are industry leaders, these are thought leaders of systems thinking, and I could continue to tap some very important resources from them. To mention a few names like Timothy Sparksman of the Canopy Lab and Bill Grant of BI. I kind of kept my network with these thought leaders, and I tap from them each time I get an opportunity. But flipping from that helped me to grow from the Ugandan market to kind of like looking at the challenges within East Africa as well, and jumping into West Africa with completely different context, different work style, and many other things. But I moved from east to west to within Mexico, and I think Mexico also gives us a lot of support for leaders like me and many others, and so I never got a lot of challenges. So for me, it was very easy really for me to come in and continue to add value with the support of the likes of Alison, Lucio, Richo, etc. I mean, these guys are very supportive. But lastly, I cannot overlook this, the acceptance of the team that I also met in Nigeria. They gave me the confidence that, we would partner to in this job and do it better. And all of these factors kind of like made me to transition from East Africa to Nigeria in a very different setting, different challenges, and yet the principles of applying systems thinking remains the same, and this is my journey really, right?
Yeah, thanks again, John. Lots of interesting insights, and kind of hear all the different people that have been kind of part of your journey and still are. Okay, moving to the fifth one. This one is we've titled Loyal Stalwarts, and this is kind of a reflection of sometimes you're moving from project level roles into, could be country director, could be organizational HQ leadership positions. But we do see that pattern. Those that stay with MSD for a long time often transition into kind of those roles in implementation agencies. It can be helpful on the one hand, it embeds knowledge and expertise kind of in the organization, but there's also a kind of key shift there from being within programs to kind of sitting outside them. And some of the drivers, this can be driven by job security and a desire for just a bit more continuity for individuals. For some people, that constant moving between countries, between projects, can be tiring. And also it can be about moving from a laser focus on single programs to benefiting kind of a wider portfolio or cohort. So I wanted to just quickly get some of your reflections, Fouzia. On the one hand, you've had this like long run, 20 plus years of working for Swisscontact in various roles. But within that, you've also over time shifted into more of a consulting advisor role. You know, what do you miss about being a team leader? And what's it like, you know, for you kind of having that continuity of perspective and now kind of engaging with crops of new projects in other contexts?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yes, as the full-time person in a project, it definitely I do miss working with one team, like working with them from A to Z, from strategizing to implementation, and then going back and having those discussions, critical discussions. But on the other hand, as I moved on to become a consultant and work with different projects in different countries, although the fly-in, fly-out model does not give you that that joy of working with one team, but it did give me a great opportunity to learn about new contexts, new sectors, and primarily gave me the opportunity to apply some of my very practical knowledge, experience from Bangladesh to be tested or to be customized in similar contexts, in similar sectors in other countries. So that really excites me still. And to be honest, what really intrigues me is how things look different, but yet are similar. So for instance, the pathways to systems change. If you look at similar sectors, be it vegetables or any particular agriculture sector, since I focus a lot on agriculture, it's so similar at times in different contexts, but the pathways to reaching a systems change, the story you tell in a different context can be so different, and the leverage points and whatnot. So that really intrigues me. And I love working with teams on those aspects. And particularly, I would say, Mike, from before, multiple years before and now, I think there is the opportunity of learning from others' successes and lessons. So now, more than what we had in the early days of Catalyst, we have a lot of projects that are doing things very, impressive. And I think at times we fail to look at those and sort of reinvent the wheel, and our time is up and the project is gone. So that's one of the things I really enjoy bringing in onto the table, to getting those lessons and examples from other contexts and trying to apply them. And one other point that really gives me joy is I bring a little bit, a great, I would say I am proud of it, that I bring in experience as a sector team member, as a deputy head of portfolio, but also as a team leader on the table. So when I'm meeting teams, I see a little bit of, I see their perspectives, what team leaders face versus what implementation challenges sector teams face. So I try my best to use that experience and maneuver and make sure that there is holistic possibilities in how things get done. Yeah, so these would be some of my points on this. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Fouzia. It's awesome to hear kind of how that like innate curiosity to learn from different contexts and that kind of comparative analysis. And also the empathy, you know, having risen through a lot of these different roles means you're able to kind of see and connect with folks. All right, so we're going to quickly touch off on the sixth out of the 6 pathways. This one we've termed kind of global nomads. And the pattern we saw here is, you know, perhaps many of you have seen it too, kind of international MSD consultants and technical experts becoming team leaders or moving from leading programs kind of into consulting practice. And so I think that's the kind of dominant point here, is not that it's a one-way journey to the top. I think it's what happens when you're seeing movement between kind of consultancy firms and leadership positions, or even between that kind of consulting advisor role and leadership positions. I think that some of the drivers here, on the one hand, is like, what's that exposure, the credibility that come with certain kind of firms that have really specialized in MSD, kind of building up those technical skills, investing in internal mentorship, and then also the kind of, again, from a kind of career personal perspective, consultancy can sometimes be desirable because of the flexibility, chance to have a home base kind of where you want it, of course, with some of the downsides that Fouzia mentioned. So maybe just to close us off here on the pathways, Dhita, if I can come back to you. I mean, you've just recently moved back and forth between a kind of internal consultant or advisor role on MSD for employment into a kind of team leader of a complex startup and now back again. Just a few quick thoughts from you on what it's been like, that kind of switching between those two perspectives.
Yeah, I think it's really good if you can, to transition, go back and forth, because it does give you a very different perspective. So for consulting and being an advisor, you have the breadth of knowledge. You see these programs here in different countries, and then when you come back, assist teams, and then they're having similar problems, and then you can be very resourceful, saying, oh, this is what I saw in different countries. Maybe you want to learn from them and adapt, or you can connect them to each other. And then when you're in the field, in the program office, you can really see how you operationalize those MSD theories that you always speak about, but you have a better sense of like those operational realities, operational pressures. Oh, so this is why the program hasn't had a partnership, because they haven't really unlocked the agreement with the district government, for example, and then they're very, very tough to break, for example. So you have this kind of empathy of that depth of experience. And I think the key of being a good advisor and a good consultant is that empathy towards the national context, towards the operational challenges. And sometimes you advise, oh, you need more MSD position or team here in the program. But you also need to think, do they even have the budget to materialize it? So I think both, it's good if you can to transition in and out.
Thanks, Dhita. Okay, we're kind of at the time we wanted to be at. I've got one last slide, which I really don't want to spend too much time on. I think if you're really interested, we've focused a lot on the career pathways. There's a whole section of the paper on kind of what are the implications for implementers and for donors, but let me give you the kind of, again, the 1-minute rundown of a couple of the key recommendations. So starting for implementers, there's kind of, I think, 2 that really rise to the top. The first one is actually more of a kind of thinking, a kind of rationale question, and like why would you invest more in your people and your leaders and in thinking about career pathways? I think the sticking point we saw so much in the clinics was, why would I invest more in people if they're just going to get poached by the competition? I think there's a resounding sense that we need to get beyond that kind of simple narrative around fear of poaching, focusing a lot more on retention, the learning benefits, the impact benefits, and the kind of sense that we're all deepening a kind of collective talent pool. And on the how, I think the overarching recommendation that comes out of the paper is more focus on intentional career development, whether that's utilizing things like performance reviews and appraisals, not just as an HR tick box, but as a kind of strategic conversation. And then also, if you think about pathways like the growth chamber, how do you cultivate more of that intentionally in particular country portfolios, or really leveraging those long-term multi-year projects where there's a chance for staff to have a longer runway, that continuity of learning and growth. And then, when that ends, don't leave them there. Think about the other pathways. On the donor side of things, a lot of points in the recommendations here that come down to kind of signaling the fact that kind of investing in people, investing in leadership is important, and signaling that at the point of tendering, or in the case of non-competitive lead design projects, in the design phase. So paying less attention to the kind of lofty years of experience and advanced degrees for team leaders, focusing more on kind of leadership teams. And then, this may seem simple, but just encouraging and reinforcing that budgeting, putting resources into people, into leadership development. So asking for leadership development plans, and then checking if they're actually happening. What are those investments in staff learning and development at the individual level, at a team level. So that is it from our kind of planned program. Thanks so much to the panel. I see a flashing number in the Q&A box. So I'll turn it over to the other Mike Albu to kind of kick us off with some questions here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Fouzia, John, and Dhita. That was really, really lovely, actually, hearing your personal stories. I've known all of you for a while, but it's always nice to hear them again. So yes, questions. I'm glad to say actually quite a few have now come in. Let me kick off with one which we had earlier, which was from Highland at ACDI Volca. What do you think the one most important investment development organizations can make to foster more inclusive leadership would be? Does anyone want to jump in there with a suggestion?
I can jump in.
Okay. Well,
yeah, so I think to answer that, Mike's last slide said it a lot. It's really about investing in the process of building a learning culture and really investing in the HR processes of looking at staff's appraisal, how the staff's career goals can be aligned with the project goals and henceforth the organization goals. So I would say that would be a key investment, which usually people don't invest in. Thank you.
If I can also add a little bit, I think what really helped me the most in Prisma was like a very close mentoring from one of the fellow head of portfolio. So I was the youngest and yeah, the only woman in there, and it is quite overwhelming for me at that time. But you know, a close mentoring, it doesn't have to be structured. It can be tailored to what you really need, what you're not confident at. And my colleague also shared a lot of resources, not even from like the development world. We exchanged, hey, this is like a good resource from Harvard Business Review on leadership, for example. So I think that also really helped a lot.
I might just make a quick observation. I think from both what Dhita and Fouzia have said, what I notice in that is that both of those actions are things that are happening kind of at the program level. So it speaks to, I mean, not to load everything on the team leader, but I think the importance of kind of seeing those HR processes, not something that just off running on the side, but proactively engaging in them, spending that extra time to be involved in them and kind of turning them towards, yeah, a kind of strategic investment instead of a bureaucratic kind of exercise, which, you know, everyone's busy, but I think the time that the leaders that do spend that time to engage in that, I think it pays dividends.
very cool. I'm just looking through some of these other questions. There's a couple actually from people who are obviously impatient to progress their careers, really asking about what I guess the essence is what would accelerate opportunities for young staff in organizations, especially if they don't necessarily see their organization having the resources or the inclination to kind of make the organizational investments. What can ambitious young people in this sector do?
Mike, I'm happy to take on that.
Thanks, John.
This question pretty much, and I don't quite remember I don't know if you remember last year in Market Systems Symposium, you know, in one of our informal moments, I asked you this, the same question that I also asked Mike Field, and I said, look, what should we, you know, as the emerging leaders in MSD really truly focus on? What should bother us? What should we prioritize? And these were two different moments, and your response and Mike Field's response were like the same, you know? Both of you said in just simple words that focus on learning. So for me, this response still also fits very well. These are individual initiatives that people need to take on themselves. An organization can only do so much to trying to, you know, get you a coach, get you a mentor, etc. But it is also incumbent of that individual to invest in skills development, in you know, learning the trade, learning systems thinking, and applying it on their day-to-day job. And that is why, for me, I always like this analogy of having a microscope in one eye and a telescope on the other, because it helps you to look at what we need to do now, but also in the future, what would matter. Thank you.
If I can also add a little bit, I think learning about kind of new emerging trends in the industry. So for example, when I was in Prisma, women's economic empowerment was quite new. And then in my independent time, I learned about it and then kind of explained to my CEO, my team leader, hey, this is what we can do to our program. And then also these days about green jobs, for example. And then this is what we can do in MSD for green jobs, for example. So I think not being afraid to learn new things and then also not being afraid to deliver or voice those kind of ideas to your manager I feel that can also accelerate your trajectory.
And sorry, a quick one, just to add to Dhita, in terms of resources, these days in most of the events, they offer scholarship. So having a lookout for those sort of opportunities of getting scholarship or sponsorship from events where you can be there in person and learn about these topics would be great. So it's more now available than before. So make use of it.
Thank you. Cool. So the flip side of that is an interesting question from Rachel Shah. What do you wish you could feed back to your organizations or managers that they did or they do that is unhelpful, even if it is perhaps well-intentioned?
I want to say something on that. That's a very good question. And I think the key point is to not invest on processes in programs that restrict critical thinking, doing new things, and taking a very dynamic approach. As we all know, in systems development, the only thing constant is change, right? So the teams should be supported with processes that really motivates that. I've seen projects with team members having great ideas, but just because of the quote unquote procurement process, things never happen in the field. So that would be my take. Thanks.
That is an interesting one, and I could add a piece to that as well. I think, thank you again, Rachel, for the question, and Fouzia, your response is just spot on. I think the feedback for organizations to me would be like, if we, like Fouzia said, if we identify with something, let's just keep there, you know. If we are a learning institution that applies systems thinking, perhaps we need to keep that as our identity rather than doing every other thing, because every other thing helps, probably the agency for the day, but it kind of distorts every other thing that would build this kind of leadership, build this kind of institutional capabilities. I fully believe that we need to decide a trade, say this is what we're going to go to, and let's just invest there, and everybody else can do the other part. That probably we are not doing. That is my opinion as well.
Thanks, John. I've got another question from Hayden about, you mentioned, John, about mentorship, and I think Fouzia also, you mentioned receiving it, and John, you talked about actually creating it. But so we'd like to hear what worked well and what didn't. What advice do you have for organizations that are looking to build a mentorship program for emerging leaders?
So for me, I think virtually it's difficult to say what did not work, because most of these were voluntary, and I also didn't know what to expect. I only came in with the mindset of curiosity to see, what can I pick from whoever offers, or volunteers to help me. If, for example, Bill Graham is in town, I know I need to probably go and have dinner with him and just talk about, the things that I've learned from my current day-to-day job, and et cetera, and also hear from his experience, as somebody who has served in the industry for a long time, and so all of that kind of like adds to the math, because it's not a clear pathway on this is how we would start our mentorship and this is how we would exit it. it's a little bit difficult to say, okay, this didn't work. I only moved inside there with the mindset of curiosity, open to learning as much as I can, and asking as many questions as I can find, to him and to many other people who have offered mentorship sessions for me.
Yeah, I would also like to add to John, I think it is really about investing a person's time a person in the key management, his or her time, to have even regular check-ins, with the staff, with the person who's being groomed to become more. For me, I would like to also take the name of Peter Ogerkamp, who was my mentor in my early days, and I would really say the way he sort of helped me in managing some of the small nuances, like this one instance where I was going to an international platform for a presentation, and I was not doing good. It was not a very good presentation I was doing in my practice session. He really made me practice, just to make sure that I am capable and I feel confident in front of my first international platform. And he gave his time for that. I really remember that time. So I think these small nuances, and like John said, it's not a matter of making it formal. It's really investing your boss or your supervisor's time in those small nuances which he or she sees in you and where there is areas of improvement. I would say that one. The other thing I would like to mention, and which Mike, you also mentioned probably in your write-up or somewhere, is this whole aspect of building internal systems to learn from each other. The Swisscontact's internal leadership clinics has been one avenue where mid to senior level staff are coming together to talk about their challenges, about what they can do. So this is also sort of approaches and systems that an organization can have on a regular basis to build capacity. Thank you.
I just wanted to add another thing that has helped me a lot throughout my career in development. So as a woman, transitioning from a national staff to like an international kind of consultant, and then now working in an international organization, sometimes I question, as a woman, how do you choose, career path, family, leadership, leadership style and everything. And I always have like some like women as mentors, like Victoria Carter, Holly, Laura Kim. Those are, I have like all these women in that have been in MSD leadership positions that I feel that I can always go to and ask. So sometimes the resources is also, and the mentors, they don't only come like within your program, but also within the industry as well. So yeah, networking, I feel is also very important.
Maybe just 10 seconds to add across those three answers. I mean, I think it's hard because I think you're trying to ask the right question, Hayden, about like what should organizations do to be intentional, how to structure it. But I think also what we're hearing in the answers is that it's like you can't overstructure it, like Fouzia said, you can't over formalize it. So therefore, I think it's more of a culture, a cultural approach as opposed to a kind of like very kind of rational strategy thing. And I think it comes down to what a few people mentioned, which is like, what kind of a culture do you need to create if you want managers who are going to slow down and take the time to meet with people? They're going to invest their time in people instead of overly elaborate strategy processes or super convoluted budgeting or whatever it is. And that's not saying that's easy to do, but I do think that's maybe the pattern that we've seen in these answers and in the wider clinics is that, how managers spend their time is a huge kind of signal of value and culture. And if we can start to shift that, or if we can celebrate those good managers who are doing that differently, I think that's maybe part of turning the tide here, but not an easy thing.
Thanks, Mike. Maybe Mike, you could also just give us a quick answer to Julian's question, Julian Hamilton Peach, who was one of the contributors to this this clinics process. Since the development of this guidance, which was after all actually only published in November, have any donors or implementers shown significant interest in applying the guidance so that people can get, have we had any kind of feedback on it yet?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think we were a little bit waiting for, kind of this webinar is probably like the first time we've really publicly gotten out and talked about it. I think a bit like what we saw with the MSD procurement clinics 3 years ago, the usual pathway, like where I would look for evidence of kind of change, is people that participate in the process, who've experienced it, then going and taking ideas and kind of going after them. And so, I mean, Fouzia talked about the internal leadership clinics at Swisscontact. That's a very obvious example. A blog post just got posted in the last week, kind of documenting some of that because of participating in the process. This group of senior leaders, including Fouzia, kind of said, let's do something, let's emulate this internally, not to create more knowledge, but actually just to develop people. And yeah, and I would argue that some of the kind of experimental stuff that ACD Evoca is doing internally, they kind of just launched a program for adaptive managers and exploring kind of emerging leaders program, to Hayden's point. I'm sure there are others. We haven't yet done what we did with the procurement papers, which is about 6 to 12 months ex post, just kind of pulse check the group. So that's probably a good nudge, Julian, that we should do that. I would guess there's probably a few other under the radar initiatives in other organizations. So yeah, let's add that to the to-do list, and maybe we can report back in a couple of months to the folks that participated. So really good question.
Thanks, Mike. So unfortunately, we are running out of time. Before I ask the last, I'll try and cram another couple of questions in, but just before I do that, I'd like to say thank you to all of you, but also thank you to everyone who's been listening in. If you would like to give us some feedback on this webinar, we'd really appreciate it. There's a link in the chat right now. Isabel will put it in, and you can just give us a 2-minute feedback, and we'd love to hear what we can do to make these webinars better. So look, 2 questions that I'm going to jam into one. So what keeps you motivated? What did keep you motivated to develop and sustain your career in MSD? And what do you think the horizon for this sector for market systems development looks like in 10 years' time?
So I can go first. I'll start with the second question. It's very difficult. I love to always, look into the future and just ask, where is this industry moving? Where, what are the major changes that are likely to happen in 3, 5, 7, 10 years? It's always very difficult to predict what would happen, and but I believe as a convert that systems thinking works for development, and we as practitioners need to continue adapting and evolving with it, and make it really relevant and fit for purpose, because until when we find something else, I think this is the most promising. What keeps me motivated is probably tied into the response that I just gave. I'm one person with always lots of curiosity. And my curiosity keeps me motivated, asking questions, and sometimes annoying questions to practitioners, to industry players. And this kind of curiosity keeps me evolving, keeps me motivated day in, day out. I don't think I can get burned out, thinking about MSD. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I can quickly jump in. I echo with John about the second question on where things are moving. With so many things happening across the world, systems thinking is important and needs to stay. So yeah, period. However you call it, MSD, ISD, whatever. In terms of keeping myself motivated, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the opportunities to learn has increased so much more this now than before. And just having that attitude, I felt maybe I've not been able to make the full use of it, but I try my best. So I think having that attitude to learn new things, especially from a systems perspective in different contexts, different regions, is definitely important. And like I said, the resources are out there. Make time for that. You will get motivated about things that are happening, and you would want to invest in applying those in your work. So I think that's one of the key things that kept me motivated. And of course, I would touch wood, great colleagues and great network people I've come across are definitely the ones who kept me motivating and going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, and for myself, I think, as John and Fouzia said, it's always evolving, but at the moment, I think due to the conflict, the civil wars, I think the intersectionality between MSD and humanitarian action is kind of like evolving, and then also the focus of displaced people, refugees. For me, from what I've seen, it's becoming bigger and bigger. And for me, this is the space that I'm learning the most about. And yeah, and excited to learn with you all on that.
Dhita. Right, we really must wrap up, Mike. I think the final word must go to you, since you've done so much legwork on this.
Yeah, I'd just say big thanks to some excellent questions, and sorry we didn't get to them all. Enormous thanks to the three of you for kind of opening up, sharing your experience. And lastly, to the 42 participants. I mean, that paper that came out has just my name on it, but you know, you got to read the acknowledgements for the really the body of experience and learning that is derived from. So yeah, thanks to everybody who participated in those clinics. And yeah, keep an eye out kind of throughout this year. There's kind of more briefs to come, hopefully some more conversations like this, and we can take advantage of some of the in-person events to take the conversation further. I think that's it. It's a wrap.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day, everyone.